fight that has me the most puzzled in terms of trying to make a pick on this entire card, we have the Ultimate Fighter Season 29 middleweight winner, the Butcher, Bryan Battle, coming at you from the Carolinas. And he's going to be taking on Louisiana's own, the Ghost, AJ Fletcher. Coach gave him the nickname because he doesn't tan too well, and we can relate to that, Matt. So when you do look at this fight, AJ Fletcher, it feels like he's been kind of passed over in the overall welterweight division. And the reason I say that is because last time out, he withstood the early barrage of the debuting UFC fighter out of Zimbabwe by way of South Africa, Themba Gorimbo, because Fletcher finished him in that fight.
Exactly. But
since then, Gorimbo's gone on to get his own win in the UFC, and he ended up in the headlines after the fact. So for Fletcher, the time away since earlier on this year hasn't necessarily been his friend, but he ends up in a big-time fight against Bryan Battle, an asterisk next to the weigh-in for Battle, because he's got that early first-round stoppage over Takashi Sato off of the win over Tresean Gore. So a good win there. You take on Takashi Sato, you get him done in the first round. That's awesome. It's a bonus, and that's great. He then goes on to lose against Rinat Fakhretdinov in that fight. I mean, Fakhretdinov drops him in the third round with a straight shot in tight, rinse and repeat with the takedowns. But Battle's last time out, we got a fight going on in the Carolinas. He's taking on Gabe Green. And Gabe Green did what other fighters have tried to do with Bryan Battle, like Andre Petrovsky and others on the amateur circuit that I'll get to. They blitz him. They try and either take him down or they blitz him with a striking. Gabe Green ran across the cage, and Gabe Green ate a big-time flurry and got knocked out in 14 seconds. The only reason why the only hometown fighter on that card didn't get a performance bonus was because of that asterisk. He showed in at 173. So you don't like to see that out of Battle from his last fight out there. But when I look at both these guys, Matt, I've long said, and I think a lot of other people too, including Dana White after Fletcher beat Damiani over on Contender Series, the guy looks a little bit more like a lightweight. It's 5'10". I don't know about that. But he is, and he tends to carry himself all right as these fights go on. Now, you might disagree with that, and I can kind of parse that one as well. Fletcher, out of all his fights, 10 wins, 9 finishes, and 6 of them in the first round. And you go look at the Fletcher losses, the one to Matt Semmelsberger where, all right, he wins the first round, looks great, doesn't win the second, doesn't win the third. Or his fight against Ange Lusa, looks really good at the start, Ange finishes really strong. Both those guys, though, fringe 15ers. I'd say 25 to 15 for both of those guys. I think Lusa looks really good.
I'd say they're about 15 to 60. I'll give you that.
Well, that's fair.
They're in that range.
When it does come down to this fight, though, Matt, like I said, this is the fight that I have the hardest time in the entire card trying to make a pick on because Battle's a decent striker, but he's really long at the end of his punches.
You got some thorough notes to your right. Who is this? Is something I know that's not in them. Who was the last Ultimate Fighter winner who really knocked your socks off and you thought, wow, this is a person who not only can go on to have a successful career, but get into the rankings, challenge for a title one day? I'm genuinely curious. It's been a minute.
No.
Now, like Mohammed Usman's going to win this weekend and go on a run.
We have 2-time Ultimate Fighter winner Brackatona out of Canada. Continues to look better.
Do you think Brackatona's going to go on a run? Be honest.
If I'm not mistaken, we're at the Ultimate Fighter 31. 5 Ultimate Fighters ago, a new champion was crowned. Nico Montano.
Oh! A fighter who didn't fight after.
You said you wanted to know about champs.
No. I asked you who you thought would go on and have a successful future is what I asked.
Zach Pound.
You've taken too long is my whole entire point. My reasoning is
Kurt Hollaba.
Tuesday Night Contender Series has taken a lot of the really good fighters that would ultimately be on shows like The Ultimate Fighter to try to get into the UFC. And I know shows like Contender Series have their own issues, right? We talk about this quite a bit, how a lot of those fights have a huge favorite that you kind of expect to get into the UFC sooner rather than later. But still, that is a pipeline for a lot of entry-level talent to get their foot in the door and make it to the UFC, where The Ultimate Fighter does take a little bit longer, right? There's a whole tournament format, you shoot this whole reality show. This is no disrespect to Bryan Battle, but in his UFC wins, we haven't learned that much more about Bryan Battle. I know the Sato win was really impressive in terms of how he was able to execute, but did we learn anything new about Bryan Battle? Not really. He knocked out a guy who wasn't really that young in his career. It was a beautiful finish, don't get me wrong. Tresean Gore, not the
settled
greatest fighter.
Settled the score against Tresean Gore, though.
Something that will go down in the annals of history. They finally, they settled it 1-1. But for Battle, his last time out too, I think Gabe Green is the best name on his resume, don't get me wrong, but he went out there and beat him so quick that I almost not discredit the win. That sounds much too disrespectful, but I can't put a lot of stock into that win just because it's easier to beat a guy in 14 seconds than it is to beat him in 15 minutes, just in terms of we know a lot more about you after those 15 minutes. And for Battle, you bring it up. He is a good striker at the outset of his reach, but he's able to keep it in a long distance type of a fight. But AJ Fletcher's whole style is to counteract that, is to get on the inside, be that ugly fighter on the inside. And for Fletcher, pacing, I think, is going to be very important for this fight. He's going to come out, he's going to burn hot. I don't think he's going to change himself all of a sudden, but can he not burn everything in the tank so he at least has enough left to go out there and win either round 2 or 3? Because that is going to be a really big question mark, especially in this matchup, because Bryan Battle likes being on the back foot. He is going to chase the finish when he is able to, but if he allows the fight to come to him, he is much more comfortable doing it that way. So I think it's going to be a fight where Battle might need to take a little while to get comfortable, but I do think he's the more well-rounded fighter, even though I just spent the last 2 minutes telling you we didn't learn a lot about him.
And you like everything out of both of these guys. I mean, maybe one guy works a little bit quicker than the other. Maybe Battle finds himself into a fight and then tends to rally in certain ones. And if you look at it for Battle, I mentioned it, fought a very, very high-level competition before making it even as a pro. As an amateur, Battle, he went, 8-2. He fought some big-time names. Cody Brundage, who's on this card, so a little bit of a Spider-Man meme there. Beat Impa Kasanganay, PFL finalist coming up on pay-per-view. But for Battle, again, it is weird. I mean, he does come out of Carolina Combat Sports and Fitness, coach over there, Tom Ziegler, but some good training partners. I mean, if you've looked at it recently, 5-2 amateur, Mr. Upright, Udo Imena, and then you also have 5-1 pro Jonathan
Mr. Upright
Martin. And if you do consider it for Fletcher, training out of Gladiators Academy, he's at a 10-inch reach disadvantage. Yeah. We'll see if Bryan Battle's able to use that, because sometimes he can keep fighters at the end of his punches. Sometimes Bryan Battle, instead of moving away from the cage, gets backed up, realizes that the cage is there, and then Bryan Battle's stuck to it like if you hit a vape pen too many times before you went to bed.
Been there before. This is the thing about Bryan Battle, though, that does concern me, especially in a matchup like this. If he is on the back foot and he's not able to gain momentum at any point, and every time he is trying to incorporate those combinations, he's just getting stopped, not in terms of he's getting hit by big shots or taken down, but he's just not able to complete a lot of those combinations. I think it's going to be a difficult night for him, but this is a fight where Battle, I think, does have the higher ceiling in terms of where both these fighters could go in the future. I think Bryan Battle, at the highest level, could probably be one of those fighters who's in that, 16 to 22 category, just to where he might not make it into the rankings, but he could be a difficult fight for anybody in the rankings. Whereas for Fletcher, it just comes down to who his opponent is going to be, for who he's going to be able to go out there and get those wins against. Because if you're any fighter who's kind of at the end of their career, you might have poor striking defense, you're not as durable as you once were, you don't want to fight AJ Fletcher. And that's a position I could see him getting himself into.
And Fletcher's got good takedowns in his own right as well. So look out for that. For Fletcher, Battle favored in the matchup. We have a look over on Topology, Matt. These voters, man. I'm going to say over under 75% Battle.
I think it'll be under, honestly.
Close favorites, and no, 775 total votes, 93% Battle, 59% by knockout for the folks that only watch the Sato fight and the fight against Gabe Green. For the 7% that have Fletcher, 61% by decision. Matt,
I'm at 63-47 personally.
MMA in 2023. This is a main card fight of a fight night.
I don't hate this fight. Just in terms of entertainment value, is this fight going to be the greatest fight of all time? No. But they match up well. One guy needs to move forward, throws big power shots. The other guy can get hit by big power shots and has the susceptibility of moving backwards. I just think both guys, it's going to be a fun fight. I don't think this will be a bad fight by any stretch of the imagination. And not that Battle or Fletcher are going to go on to beat, I don't know, who's a good fighter in the top? Colby Covington one day, or Gilbert Burns, or whoever. Name your top 15 welterweight. But I do think Bryan Battle has more components to his game, and I think he has more areas to win this one. If he won by decision, I wouldn't be surprised. And if he got a finish, I think both guys could probably win by finish, don't get me wrong. But if Battle got one, I wouldn't be surprised either. And even though Gabe Green, we didn't learn a lot in that performance, still a good name to have on your resume, I think. So you can't discredit it completely.
I like Battle in the fact that if he does get taken down, Fakhretdinov, that guy's an MFer when it does come down to the fight and the grappling. For Bryan Battle, though, in the majority of his fights, he's able to get out of some of those nasty positions. But when you're handcuffed handcuffing a guy with your opposite hand and then punching him with the other
not
one.
much a man can do.
It's tough to do there. So for me, I do have Battle in the matchup. I've given you kind of the synopsis on both guys, how one guy could win, how the other guy could lose, and vice versa. So you make your own approximations on this one, and make sure you let us know down below in the comment section who you have. Both of us going with Bryan Battle to get the win. It was formerly Pooh Bear, and then he opted for the Butcher. That's aggressive.
I think Pooh Bear's way better. You don't? I think Pooh Bear's fun. You always talk about how if you had a walkout song, it would be like Janet Jackson. Okay, calm down. Have some fun. Let the man walk out to Pooh Bear.
I'd walk out to Sundown by Gordon Lightfoot.
So you've changed it. That's my whole point. I just mean, if a guy MMA is a sport devoid of fun, right? Everybody's just like calling each other bad names, being real angry all the time. Pooh Bear's a fun nickname.
JMMA is where it's at, and if you watch like the Deep Jewels and the Risings of the world, they know how to get down and have some fun. Matt, we'll move it forward. Some big time fights that are left on this card. You're not going to want to miss any of it. Keep locked in with Fight Night Picks. We always say,
Let's get into it.